Okay guys, let's begin. Thank you all for coming. It's going to be an intensive session. I hope you'll enjoy it. The main difference between a game and reality is that a game is a simulation. It's a simulation where you can make mistakes, where you can practice, where you can learn. But in reality, you don't get that opportunity. You don't get to make mistakes. And if you do, you pay the consequences. So today, we will be metaphorically building a character of you as your future representation of a person who is striving for building his personal project. As you know, I originally came from a background of business who has fallen in love with computer science, and since then I always try to blend business strategy and computer science together and bring that knowledge to you. I've received multiple questions from different students on how should they start their own project, and I decided to put this presentation together to answer a lot of questions. In this presentation, I bring you the fundamental knowledge that I believe is crucial for anybody who is thinking of starting his own business. So let's begin. Now, in the age of rapidly advancing technology, I believe that you can become superior if you learn business and computer science hand by hand. If I were to create a subject that would blend business and computer science, I would call it business algorithms, where you learn to think purely and accurately like a machine, and at the same time you learn to become strategic and analytical like a human being. These two combined create a perfect mix. Probably none of you have seen this, but this is one of the first video games that I got to interact when I was a child, and it was called Diablo. The point is that you have to create a character, you have to fight the ultimate evil through a lot of challenges, and you build up your character level by level, amending his properties. By that you create a stronger character that evolves and becomes more powerful. Now, I believe that this is a very fundamental concept that you should apply from this or any other video game that has this concept of building a character into real life. Since I only have a bit more than an hour to cover all the fundamentals, I'll be moving in a very fast pace. And we're going to be touching the surface on these three main pillars that we're going to cover. I know that each topic individually is a point worth of a separate discussion, but this presentation is split into three main pieces. In the first piece, we will learn the concepts of how computer thinks and the tools you could borrow from that field. When we will move to a more theoretical side of strategic toolkit, and then we'll build the mindset and the first steps that you have to cover before you start your own projects. And as long as our short lecture will go, we will see how the character that you today will be building up with me grows. In order for us to understand how to think, we need to develop a foundation of decision making. Boolean logic is a fundamental concept implemented behind computer science. It was originally developed by George Boole in the middle of 19th century. It is also referred to as the Boolean logic. It forms the backbone of the binary system of algebra, a cornerstone in modern computing and digital circuit design. Now, you probably may have heard of Alan Turing. He is a key figure in computer science. He basically expanded George Boole's work and created what we know now as the computer. As we delve into this topic, we'll see how the Boolean logic is now not just a theoretical concept, but it is a practical tool, driving everything behind all your smartphones, watches, TVs. This is a system which underpins the core of digital decision making. How the machine gets to make the decision is what we'll learn. Now, Boolean logic is essentially about making simple decisions a yes or a no, binary if you've heard, zeros and ones, true or false scenarios. Now, these are Boolean logic gates. You don't need to understand how they work exactly in the circuits, but the concept is that the machine receiving the signal accepts either the true or the false signal. In the case of false signal, there is no signal, but if there is a signal, that is true. How we can mirror this to your life? If you have, if we look at the example of the AND Boolean logic gate, it's when you need to have two conditions at the same time. When you type in your login and your password, you need that in order to log into your email. An OR gate is when you need to go to the groceries and you decide, are you going to buy apples or oranges? This is a simple OR choice or a not choice. We have a thermostat in this classroom that knocks off if the temperature goes above or below a certain point. One of the key fundamentals in understanding your options, how to make decisions, you always have to understand what is your sample space. Now, the concept of Bernoulli distribution is a fundamental concept which is very powerful, and this distribution is, in simple words, it is the way to understand random events with two possible outcomes, typically labeled as success or failure. This is where you see the connection with the Boolean gates. Now, in probability theory, the difference between finite, a discrete sample space, and infinite sample space is very fundamental. Finite sample space is when you have a limited amount of options. You can do A, B, C, Z tops. But an infinite sample space is when we're talking about time. At a certain point of time, we either take a slice of that time and have an understanding what is happening in that certain time period, or we're going to look at the big picture and it's going to be an infinite set. You cannot say when the time has started and when it is going to end. That's why it's called an infinite sample space. Now, when you have two options, each case scenario, are you going to attend this class or not? Let's assume you have a probability of 60% attending this class. According to the Bernoulli distribution, the probability of you not attending this class is 40%. As you can see on the formula on the screen, you just subtract 60% from 100, you get your 40. This is a very easy and a fundamental concept of decision making. You always have to see the mirror side. If you do something, what is the other outcome? Now, what you must always remember, in a discrete sample space, meaning when your options are limited, all the probabilities together always sum up to 1. This is a fundamental concept with discrete sample space. Now, this is a very interesting concept. You can see the scary word, the Gaussian distribution. You would think, oh my God, what is that? But actually, it's just a bell curve. The concept of probabilities is everything that you have to put in your head when you make a decision. Now, the probability density function is a crucial concept for understanding the continuous outcomes in probability theory. Unlike when you have a discrete sample space, continuous outcomes such as time, they cannot be pinned down to certain points, as I've said. Now, the probability density function, in this case, we have a normal distribution. Let's assume you have a cafeteria. let's assume you put all your clients on a timeline and measure how many people walk in. Now, let's assume you have a spike around lunch. People love to eat. They go to the cafeteria. And this is a distribution that illustrates that around noon, you have the most amount of people attending your cafeteria. Now, you would say, duh, what does that tell me? Well, when you have a bell curve, a smart word for the Gaussian distribution, you can make all sorts of interesting calculations and things with it. Now, if you know the spread of your clients during the day in the cafeteria, then you are able to manipulate the data. You can predict the amount of customers that you're going to have the next day, a week after that, and whatever. Now, these models exist so that we, instead of focusing on a particular point in time, we focus on time periods. That is why it is called density function, because we summarize the interval in a certain time period to have an understanding of what's happening. Now, what's interesting is that it's symmetrical. So you can see its bell-shaped curve. And it holds a lot of information inside. For instance, you can find the mean, you can find the standard deviation, you can perform linear regression, you can do all sorts of things with the data just simply put on a simple chart like this. Now, I know that we don't have people in the classroom here who actually write code, but I want you all to witness it, because when you have the chance to actually read code and at the same time not being a software engineer, you get a sense of relief. Now, this is a Python function. Now, I have to grade the classroom, and I have to grade it by a curve. Now, we've talked about Boolean logic gates in the beginning, when I have to make the decision, do you pass the class or do you not pass the class? Do you have the certain amount of grade needed to pass the class, and what particular grade do you get? Now, if you look at the code, you can see it's pretty simple. The function is called grade message. Don't be bothered about a lot of text in the window. Just stay with me. This function is called grade message. You can call it anyway, it doesn't matter. It takes in an input of a name and a grade. Then it performs evaluation. If the grade is more than 90 points, then you get a message that says, excellent work, Frank, you scored an A with 91 points. Or if you go below that, you get another message stating that you have a B and C and whatever. This is a very simple function, and this is how code actually looks like. And syntactically, it's not hard to write a program, because this is a mini program, you can call it that. Now, why do I emphasize attention on this? Because functions is the basis for everything in programming. Now, you take the foundational logic of having options, choosing and, or, not, other Boolean logic gates. You take in the probability concept that you have the choices of choosing between something. Then you build up the mindset that there is actually functions that perform in a manner that you write. Now, you give it specific inputs, it returns specific results. This is where we jump into the concept of functional decomposition. Now, functional decomposition is when you break down complex systems into smaller parts. Now, it involves, the idea is just to simplify a complex process by driving it into a smaller model, a more understandable component or a function. This is actually one of the most important concepts that you have to understand. It may seem obvious, but the point is that you must use this tool everywhere. If you see anything, you talk to anybody, you see a business process, you see a computer science process, you can always decompose to a smaller stage. Now, it works by you finding the main function, splitting it into smaller pieces, and working on it piece by piece. This is just a logical breakdown of processes that you can perform. For example, this is a piece of wood. It doesn't present any interest apart from just being a piece of wood. This is another piece of wood. And yet together, combined, it is a plane. Now, why is this important? Because separately, these three pieces of wood, they didn't attract any interest in you. Okay, it is a piece of wood. Why bother? To become a professional project manager or an owner of business or an entrepreneur, you have to see the pieces and see that they can be a part of something bigger. Now, decomposing is not just breaking down from something big to something small. You can always work upwards. You can see a piece, and people with true potential can look at this and say, okay, I see this as a plane. This is a plane. Now, your character started to grow. Let's talk about breaking down a complex function. Let's assume you are going on a workout and you need to write a program that will output the results of your workout. Now, what does a program that analyzes your workout in your smartwatches or smartphones, what does it do? It does a simple calculation. This is the function. Let's say we wrote that code. This is actually a series of functions that help you calculate how much calories you've burned on your workout. Now, function number 1 calculates the calories burned from the running distance. So it takes in the distance, it multiplies it by a number, and you get a result. Because on average, you burn a certain amount of calories per mile or kilometer. Same thing applies to the functions that go next: lifting, walking, whatever. Now, this is a process decomposed. This is a workout, but you broke it down into smaller pieces that to have an understanding how did your workout go, you have to analyze how much you ran, how much you lifted, how much you walked, what is the result in calories, minutes, miles, whatever. So this is an example of code. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward, it's simple. The last function may seem a bit more complex because it's taking in the results of the top 3 functions and putting it inside to itself to put out the message, to calculate the total and to return what was the outcome of the workout. So to illustrate, this code looks as a model like that. Now, if you would decompose this Python program, it would look like that. Analyze a workout. You give in specific inputs like 5 miles, 80, 30 minutes, and 3 kilometer walk. They take all that information, they just simply multiply those numbers, work with it, make the assumption, return the result. This is a concept behind almost every Python program. This is Python logic. It takes in an input and returns a result in the way that you have programmed it. Now, we've talked about decision trees. Decision tree is a way of making fundamental decisions. If you would go to a vacation to Europe, let's say you'd be choosing between Europe, if you'd be going on a vacation and you'd be choosing between Europe and Africa, let's say you have options in Europe to go only to England or Italy. This is how your decision tree looks like. It is a fundamental concept of drawing out the outcomes of your possible decisions. Now, we're going to be upgrading this concept. You can always expand the decision tree more and more depending on your situation, but this is a simple representation just showing how the concept works. So again, you have an assignment, you have a task to go on a vacation to Europe or Africa. And by choosing one of those, you have to make the next decision of going to England, Italy, or Casablanca or Cape Town. Now, if we would take decision trees to the next level, I would add probabilities on it, so that not only you have a map of your decisions, but you actually can have the probabilities of each outcome. Now, in this example, we have a coin toss that we flip 3 times. Each time you have only 2 possible outcomes, heads or tails. Now, in this example, we flip it 3 times, and by the end, there are a total of 8 possible scenarios of outcomes. There can be 3 heads in a row, there can be tails, heads, and whatever. 8 possible outcomes. Now, to calculate each outcome, you simply multiply the probability of each branch before the last outcome. So to get the result, for example, of getting us 3 heads in a row, we multiply 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5, and we get 1/8. The interesting fact about this, that not only we can manipulate our decisions, but we can calculate the other probabilities even that we don't know. If we jump back to the Bernoulli distribution that we talked about in the beginning, the sum of all probabilities in a discrete sample space always equals to 1. So even if you didn't know the other outcomes, you can always assume that the total probability of all events in sum are equal to 1 in a discrete sample space. Now, the next level of decision trees, I would say, is Markov Chains. Markov Chains is a powerful concept that stands behind all your phones, everything machine learning, deep learning, face recognition, all these fancy words that you've heard. It is a very powerful tool. Basically, it represents a stochastic process that describes a sequence of possible events. Now, if you would just take your decision tree, you can only head one way. On the decision tree, if you chose a route, if you got heads in the first outcome, there is no way you can come back to the other branch. Markov Chains introduces a little different approach. Now, in a Markov chain, you are in motion. So if you left a single state, there is a possibility of you coming back to that state. Now, in statistics, when you calculate the probability of an event, there is a whole branch of theory called Bayesian inference that we're not going to talk about here. It assumes that you take an assumption past experience of an event. In simple words, Markov chains state that you don't need past experience to make your future decisions. This is the crucial difference when you come to actually making a decision. You either accept and learn from past experience, or you only act from the options that you have. Markov chain is a representation of a model of you making decisions without looking into the past. As a consequence, one of the most important concepts about this model is that it doesn't have memory. So if you started at node 1, there is a 70% chance that you're going to end up in that same node and not going to leave it. But there's also a 30% chance that you're going to move to node 2, and so on. Now, moving away from computer science, closer to business, we need to have an understanding before we start our project how money works. You need to develop an understanding of assets, liabilities, and net worth. Assets are things that you owe or a business owns. Think of them like the tools and resources that are used to produce and make money. Where on the other side we have liabilities. And liabilities are funds that are owed to someone else. And to understand the actual value of a project or a company, in simple terms, of course there are more complex rules, but in simple terms you can use this tool and just subtract from your total assets your liabilities, and you're going to see what's going to be left at the end. Meaning that if you take away everything that you have right now and subtract from it the money and the resources that you owe to someone, is there anything that's going to be left on the table? SWOT analysis allows you to strategically evaluate your planning. To perform strategic planning, to evaluate your project or a business from 4 different perspectives. This is a very popular tool. Now, when you come to assumption, you look at the strengths, you look at the weaknesses, you look at the opportunities, and you look at the threats. Now, these things are not finite, meaning that some people or some analytics may see some things as a strength, whereas others may see that same thing as a weakness. Whereas you have to develop the skill set to be able to use this tool and getting the most accurate results. And being honest with yourself also. So, if you come to a decision that you're going to make your project, first of all, you have to perform the SWOT analysis. You have to understand what is going to be your power. Is your power going to be in your adaptability, or are you going to be so competent in what you do that you're going to thrive? What are going to be your weaknesses? Meaning that how much money do you have to uphold on a constant basis to support the business running? Maybe the problem of your business is going to be the location where it is situated. Maybe you will not be able to sell as much as you wish. You have to look honestly at these things. Now, when we're talking about opportunities and threats, taking into account the potential expansion is very important, because not all people think on 2 or 3 or even 4 years ahead. They just think, I just need to get this thing running and maybe I will transition to another point later. But a point of understanding at the initial stage is what are you going to do later is very important. And of course, threats. If there is competition, if there are legal regulations, if there are market shifts that don't allow you to thrive as if you would, these things all have to be taken into consideration prior to you making your decision. The concept of upkeep is something that you have to keep in your head. Always, all the time. If you're going to be building your project, it has to be an internal clock for you. Now this is a screenshot from Warcraft 3. What is interesting about this screenshot is up on the right there. You see it says no upkeep. Now it is a strategy game where you had to build up your base, build an army, and then conquer lands, territories, whatever. quite entertaining, but that's not the point. The point is that when you begin and you only have one building where you just start and you just start gathering your resources, you don't have any upkeep. But as soon as you build your army and you start to expand, your upkeep gets high. Because you have to feed that army, you have to provide them with shelter, food, and whatever. That is called upkeep. Same goes with your business. Now, when you execute your project, you will inherit expenses all the time. It will be rent, it will be salary, it will be one-time expenses. You will never, in most cases, you will never be able to predict all of the possible expenses that you will incur. And that turns into an upkeep. So if you hold on expenses on a regular basis, like operating costs, technically it turns into an upkeep. So you always have to think, what is the baseline of the finance that I have to maintain in order to sustain my business? You have to keep that number in your head and sleep with it. Because the moment you see your sales report or whatever you do go below that number, that is where you get your red flag. Well, actually, you should get your red flag before you get to that number, but the moment that you see that your upkeep is more than what you make, then you're in trouble. That means that you do not generate enough funds to successfully manage your business. Now, resource allocation and cost estimation may be obvious things, but it is a fundamental tool. You have to learn how to allocate resources. You have to make the decision of that option A is not important for me right now, then option B, and I have to sacrifice something and I'll choose B. Resource allocation, you can make budgeting decisions to lower your costs. You can fire some people if you feel that they're not efficient enough and they're not performing output. That's why in big companies you get those layoffs that you hear about. They don't happen just like a natural disaster on occurrence. They happen because of some mismanagement or a global economic factor that influenced that decision. Correct cost estimation is also a fundamental skill. So knowing the actual value of something is a skill that has to be obtained by you swiftly. Here's an example. If I would ask you, I need to drive down to Sam's Club and buy a box of chips. You would Google and see how much it costs, and I would ask you, how much will it cost me to get those chips? And you would say 15 or whatever bucks. Let's say it's $15. And that would be an incorrect mistake because that's the price of the product. But what is inherently happening in this moment, if I decide to go and get those chips, I have to also assume for cost of my labor, for the cost of depreciation of my car, the cost of fuel that I incur to get there. All these factors go inside. This is called cost estimation. You should know how to measure your expenses, and looking blindly that if I need to buy a pack of chips, I can just go to Sam's Club and I'll pay 15 bucks, that's it? No. That is 40 minutes of your time. How much does your hour cost? Number one. Your gas, your depreciation, your taxes, whatever, all are the factors that can incur. And a lot of people starting out, they don't think about it, and they should. Porter's 5 forces is also a very powerful tool. Actually, in my edition, I took the liberty to amend it a bit because when Porter invented this model, I think it was in the late 80s, in Boston, by the way, I don't think he had those problems. I don't think he saw those problems in the market that there are now. Now, if you take this model and you project it to your future business, what do you have to do? You have to understand the bargaining power of buyers. What does that mean? It means how much do the buyers have negotiation power when they buy from you. And the power of suppliers. How much negotiation power do your suppliers have over you? If they're going to raise the cost, will that influence your business relationship with them directly? Competition is also a very important thing. It focuses on intensity of competition in the industry. If you want to set up an ice cream shop next to campus, and there are 5 ice cream shops that already exist over there, then the rivalry amongst competition is very high, meaning that it is a red flag and you should consider rethinking your business strategy and idea. Threat of substitutes is when your product can be easily substituted. The name tells by itself. It's when your clients can walk up to your ice cream shop and say, no, I'm going to go to another one. Or I'm not going to eat ice cream, I'm going to get a yogurt today. So the threat of substitution is mostly about the likelihood that your customers will find a different way to do what you do or buy it from someone else. In my amendment, I would highly recommend to adjust this model and to add 2 blocks that would be power of adaptability and responsiveness. As we can see now with the market that's constantly moving, changing, evolving, companies have to adapt, especially if they're somewhat related. Actually, all the companies now, with AGI and AI companies that we have now, companies even not related to AI adapt that as a tool and become more powerful, meaning that they have to adapt and become responsive. Otherwise, your competitors will. So the choice is not that big. Threat of external disruptions. If we take Washington, D.C. now, and let's say you have the idea of opening your candy shop in Washington, D.C., or a coffee shop. If you would look at that point, threat of external disruptions. Washington, D.C. is one of the most highly criminal states as of yet. Meaning that the crime rate is so high that the chances of you being robbed in the middle of the day is very high. So if you consider opening a business in a hot spot like that, you should revise if you would take the threat of external disruptions. Now, it doesn't have to be crime. Another example can be environmental. If you want to open a cafeteria, let's say on the beach, you have to consider for threat of external disruptions, as in floods, for example. Storms occur and natural disasters occur and businesses suffer from that. That is also a very important point of concern that businesses should acknowledge. Now, the PESTEL analysis is a very powerful tool that allows you to take another angle, to take a look at your project from another side. Now, it doesn't matter if you're assessing a big company or a small one, this tool is applicable to anything. Now, the point is that you take block by block and analyze the project. For example, if you're planning to trade microchips with China, do you have any political factors that may influence your business? Yes, because of the trade restrictions and everything that may or have come in place. Economic factors. If you start a business in a place of high inflation, then you have to take into consideration that you always will have to adjust your prices, that you're not going to be stable. You are always going to be chasing down the market. Now, social terms, as we've discussed in our example with McDonald's and India, At first, you may think that it's not a good idea to open up a burger shop in India, but you can make a chicken and it will be specialized and you will do good. So this is an example of a social limitation that binds businesses. They will not buy beef from you on the mass market. Now, technological, environmental, and legal, those are frameworks that, in simple consideration, technological is if you have an accounting firm and you perform accounting services, there is a technological threat that your services may be substituted by AI. Environmental, as I've said, is natural disasters and other phenomena that may occur, or environmental regulations. If you put your coffee shop on the seacoast, it can get washed away by the waves if the tide comes. Now, lastly, but not leastly, legal is the legal limitations on the industry or a particular district or a field. Now, do you have to get permits to execute your project? Do you have to comply with governmental requirements to launch your project? And of course, data protection is a very important point because many companies forget about that when they start working with clients and start gathering personal information from clients without getting their consent. There's also a point of concern. I highly advise you, if you think on starting a project, do the legal research very carefully, because it's very easy to screw up in this and then face the consequences. Now that we've taken all those tools that you've just heard, and you're going to be asking, okay, so what do we do now? Now we have to define who are you, or are you an entrepreneur or not? Now, number one, an entrepreneur is the person who creates value. That is the base definition. It's not about trading, it's not about wearing suits, it's not about buying. It's about creating value. Now, I've tried to segment businesses into 4 different categories. Number one is manufacturing. So if you are a business that creates some physical goods, that would be food or construction or whatever. Services, it's when you it's when you offer services, not necessarily directly working with physical materials and physical goods. Trading businesses is a separate type of business because not all of them create value, even though by definition they have to, but it's still a business because they make money off trading. So the fundamental concept behind that type of business is buy something somewhere cheaper and sell it somewhere for more. And lastly is hybrid. Hybrid is when you have a mixture of maybe manufacturing and services and trading. It is a mix. When you're just sitting there and thinking, should I start my own project? You have to first of all acknowledge the idea. Now, how does that process happen? First of all, you have to decide what is it that you're actually going to do. Is it going to be a service, a product, a trade? Just like I said in the last business, you have to define the type of the good or service. Who? Who are the people who are going to buy from you? What are the ways that you're going to find those people? How is a very interesting topic because you have to understand the technology of your business functioning from A to Z before you start your business. A lot of people don't do that, but it is very important to draw out a map of everything that needs to be done for your business to function. We're going to be talking about Business Canvas a little bit more later. Now, after you have an understanding of how you're going to do your business, you have to understand the problem or the need that your service addresses. Now, it is a bit correlated with creating a value, but it's different. It's about addressing a particular problem. Now, you may not have an answer to that question because not all businesses address a particular problem. For example, a particular problem is making wooden planes with engines. I want to solve a problem of particular children not having access, or all children in New Hampshire not having access to planes with electric engines. Or you can go in even more deep. You can solve an actual real-life problem, like I want to solve the problem of homeless people. So I want to build a shelter or whatever. That is a problem. Now, where are you going to do that? You have to determine the market and the location of your product or a service. Also, understanding of when you will be launching your product and what are the life cycle stages of that project. And of course, as we've talked about finance, you have to estimate costs, your upkeep, and your potential revenue. We need to draw a business canvas. What is a business canvas? A business canvas is a model of your project. Now, metaphorically speaking, this plane is a canvas because it has certain functions that it performs. It's made out of wood. It has certain shape with particular pieces of wood that needs to be manufactured in a certain way in order for this plane to fly. Business canvas is building a model of your project or a business. I know I tell you that never put a lot of text on your slides, but in this case I do, because you can just simply copy and paste this 12-step program. These are 12 steps that you have to perform before launching a business. These are the 12 steps that you have to do in order to build your business canvas. Now, you start with your name. You choose the type of the business. You understand your key activities, what you're going to do, the distribution channels, customer segments, key resources, value propositions, financial plan, organizational structure. These are pretty self-explanatory things. Pricing strategy, meaning how much you will be charging for your products, how you're going to be managing your costs, and you have to analyze the market and consumer behavior. You have to acknowledge certain things before you jump into this, because your life will change drastically. First of all, if you decide to make your own project, your life will change and it's never going to be the same. On your resume, in your relationships, in your family, with your friends, your life will change. It may sound not so grandeur, but actually it is big. You will see the difference if you walk into this field, and you will see how people change, how they relate to you. You have to learn how to sacrifice yourself and how to work hard. You won't have time for Netflix. You won't have a lot of time to spend your time with family and friends. And this is an issue for a lot of people. So before jumping in, you have to understand the level of commitment. Being an entrepreneur is a job where you carry multiple hats, meaning that when you start out, you are the legal counsel, you are the accountant, you are the project manager, you are probably manufacturer in many cases, you are the logistics center, you are the customer relations department, you are everything in one. Well, unless you go to a venture capital company, get a lot of money from them, hire a lot of people, and build your project by separating the tasks. But like Most of the businesses, even the most successful ones, they start with just one person doing all the job. And that's actually how you master this craft, because you have a genuine understanding of what you do. Because if you have an understanding how you functions from A to Z, you know all the steps, you are able to efficiently control the future employees that are going to be working for you. And of course, work hard and don't put your head down. It will be tempting, and people do expect support, but the only support, in most cases, the only support that you will get is the support from yourself. If I would be forcing you to ask yourself questions before you start this, these are the questions that I would ask you. Do you enjoy what you do? That is the fundamental question. Do you see yourself doing this for 5 or 10 years? If you actually feel that it's not a one-time thing and you feel passionate about it, then yes, go ahead. You have to be honest. Do you believe in the success? Because if you don't, there's no point of starting. Because when you start and you invest, and in the middle of the way or even later you start to doubt, like, I shouldn't have done that, that was a stupid decision, I should have just went and get that job at Burger King, and I should have just stayed there. That's not the way. Because if you go down this path, you have to fight till the end. And failure is not an option. And regular life with other people who seem comfortable in their life, they have hikes on weekends, they go on vacations to the Bermuda, and it seems like a life that you can envy. But there is the other side of the coin. If they get laid off, where are they then? A lot of people, like we had those layoffs last fall, cool top managers, professionals of their craft cannot find a job now. Even though they worked in the Fortune 500 companies, they are now screwed. So don't drive yourself by the thought that their life is better than yours in these terms, because starting your project is sacrifice, is loss of friends, loss of family, loss of money. I mean, not complete, but still, in some point, your life will change, and you will not have the time to dedicate to everything that you enjoyed before. So, and when you look past your shoulder and you think, well, that guy, he just got a bachelor's degree and he just works at a cool company and his salary is huge. But answer yourself this question. If you two together are in the nature and he is cut off from his job because he is dependent, he is just selling himself for money. But when he is not needed, he is going to be looking for someone else to buy his services. Whereas you, as an individual project manager, entrepreneur, you are self-dependent. Working hard is essential. If you don't put in enough effort into what you do, or don't have the passion for it, as soon as your plane takes off, your wing will break. Why? Because you did not put in the effort to make it better. You did not recheck. You did not consult with someone. You did not make your calculations, assumptions in the way you should. You performed a bad job, meaning. And since you are the only boss to yourself, you always have to check yourself for the accuracy of the job you do. After you've planted the idea, you have to research and explore. Understand, how is the market feeling itself? What are the opportunities out there with all the tools that we've just discussed? When you planted the idea, you research and explore, then you move to the next stage, you doubt and ask questions. This is a very important skill set of an entrepreneur, is to ask questions. Whenever you have the possibility and you're eager to understand something, don't be lazy and ask questions. If you don't understand something or anything, raise your hand and ask questions. Because getting the information in a necessary time sometimes is very crucial. Functionally decompose everything you see. Just develop this habit when you're walking around, when you're seeing these chairs, these screens, this laptop, whatever. Think, decompose, just make it a mental practice for yourself. Okay, how is this made? How is this remote made? Is there a specific company that actually does this? So actually someone has a business that creates these remotes and sells them? If I would do this, how would I do this? Now, after you functionally decompose, you learn the tools, you get the knowledge that you don't have. Recheck twice before jumping in. After that, when you have the fundamental knowledge to operate the project, you build the canvas of your business. When you build the canvas, you've made the decision, you go into hunter mode. Meaning you cannot overtrust anyone, and you can never expect appreciation. Now, I know this is a little bit of a low grade, may sound not encouraging, but it is the truth. Because at the end of the day, when you get the hits, you're going to be looking around for support. And if you have that support, that's awesome. But don't live by it. A few things that I would like to recommend is adapt artificial intelligence. Now, we live in a world where AI is becoming a thing, and not knowing how to use it is your laziness, you agreeing to not accept the knowledge. You intentionally agree that you don't want to get the knowledge. That is a different topic. Prompt engineering, Googling. This is a skill of finding information. This is a skill of talking to a computer. You can have different people that are going to Google the same, that are going to look for, let's say, how much do the Sam's Club chips cost? If I take 5 people and ask all of them, just look it up. They will do it in different ways. Someone will go directly to Sam's Club website and look there. Someone will Google. Someone will use Yahoo. Someone will call his mother and ask how much did the chip cost last week. So there are different ways of getting information, and you have to learn how to communicate properly with these tools, because essentially it is information at your fingertips. I would also recommend to listen to Andrew Huberman. You know, I've turned on a few videos from him on my lectures. By listening to smart people, not just particularly him, but other people, instead of Netflix and other stuff, invest, because now you have the time, which a lot of people don't, unfortunately. Use that time wisely. It's better for you to set the foundation of your successful future now and to invest into knowledge. The more you consume, the more you know. The more things you are able to do. Read what you sign. When you're starting your business, it is important. Stay alert for people who will be extra friendly to you and try to take advantage over you. I also call them parasites. You are going to encounter them if you're going to start your project. Just beware. There is a lot of temptation to share your weight with someone else and to be a partner with someone in business. But I highly recommend you not to do that, because there will always be a point when someone thinks that he's working more than you or he is. And never stop. The distance to information and time changed drastically. Previously, people had to carve out on caves messages and events that happened. Then we had the books. The point of transition of information from one person to another happened by caves and men, as we start off. Then we had books. Books was a universal source of information, but it's still not fast enough. If we're looking for an answer to a question, what is a perceptron and how does a neural network work, it would usually take us more than a month to find the answer, because you have to find the proper person who works somewhere, who probably knows someone. It is a long process. The distance to the information got shorter because the introduction of internet, a bunch of websites started building up. That was an industry that was rapidly growing. And then in the early 2000s, we have had the announcement of smartphones and YouTube, which are extremely powerful tools for knowledge gathering. You can basically find anything on YouTube now. How to fix a car, how to write a program. A lot of these things. The access to information is close, but you still have to watch. Now, in 2023, we have achieved a certain level of progress that now we have large language models that allow you not to spend time browsing through endless Google commercialized search, but just getting the information straight up front. Now you have AI. Sarah.
Instructions?
Explain how a perceptron works.
A perceptron, sir, is a simple type of artificial neuron used in machine learning. Think of it like a decision maker that takes in inputs, like numbers, and decides if the sum of these inputs meets a certain threshold. If the total is high enough, the perceptron activates and outputs a certain value, like saying yes. If not, it outputs a different value, like saying no. It's like a light switch that turns on only when enough light hits it.
We're done for now.
For the enclave.
Now, that was just a short demonstration that information is at your fingertips now. You don't even have to type. You just take your phone, you ask your question, you get an explanation. Now, the way you talk to that system is another topic. You have to learn how to talk to the gatekeeper to the information. Because the way you ask is the way you're going to get your information. If you ask the question bad, then probably the result is going to be bad. So learn how to adapt and talk to these systems. Now, taking broader scope, what do we learn from today? We take all the tools that I gave you. We build up a business canvas. You execute your plan. Your fight will begin. And along your journey, you will win and you will lose. You learn from losing and you learn from winning. And you fight again. And that sequence never stops. And each time, like a Markov chain, it's a never-ending process. You'll be looping in that win-lose fight, win-lose fight. And you always have to learn and grow from the experience that you get. So let's answer the question, who is an entrepreneur? You are the one who always learns. You are the one who is always in race with time. Where everybody see nothing, you see an opportunity. You mentor and control, supervise and enforce. You bring people into your life, and you will learn how to let them go. You're the one to arrive first, and you are the last to leave. You're the one to thrive most from your success and face the consequences of decisions you make. you're the one to take all the hits and learn to get back and fight. As the fighter, the creator, and a problem solver, you will always remain unbound. Remember, it's not a profession, it's a way of life. Thank you. I wanted to ask you to come up after the class to me. I want to I've got planes for all of you. Now I want you to take a model for yourself and build and project your dream. I want you to take this plane, to put it together, to paint it in the way you want, to name it in the way you want. Let that be your dream. Let that be not even, it doesn't have to be a project or a business case. Let that just be your dream. Put it somewhere so that everybody can see, and keep it in your head, because time is running out. Our life is very short and we don't get much to live our dream. So please come up and take it.